Good to be here. Always good to be here. I'm currently in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and it's very late at night. I'm very tired, and I've got a very early flight to catch tomorrow. I've actually got a train to catch before then because I'll be leaving from Amsterdam airport. But whew, I'm tired. All I can think about is sleep. Anyways, this is a short video introduction to my latest art chat. And this is a conversation with an artist whose name is LUKOS Hay, or Luke Hay, who is originally from Australia, but has lived in Prague in the Czech Republic for many years, as so many creative people throughout the ages seem to have done at one point or another in their lives. He's actually got an exhibition in Prague currently. So we talk in this conversation. We talk about art, life, death, and everything in between. And actually, we had discussed the possibility of filming one of my long take videos at his art studio in Prague last year, but things didn't really work out in the end. I'm hoping that they'll work out this time around when I'll be in Prague in March, and that I get to actually film his art studio for the long take series. But in the meantime, I thought it would be a good idea for us to actually get to know each other because we had never talked before. And so we both took times to just have a chat. And besides his work as an artist and his paintings, we talk about his work as an educator. So it was a delightful experience, and I'm very happy to have documented it. And I'm just as happy to be presenting it as part of my art chats. And I hope you enjoy it. So gather around the lava lamp. Tune in, drop out, as they used to say when TV was cool. Chill out and enjoy.
Hello.
Lukos, how are you?
Uh, I'm very well, thank you.
It's great. It's a pleasure to talk with you because this is going to be actually an interesting podcast. So far, I've interviewed people that I actually met and have known for quite some time. But this time, it's a little different because we really have never met, and we're going to be talking with each other and getting to know each other a little bit through this kind of podcast. So it's very exciting.
Yes, yes, fantastic. Okay, yeah. Yeah, we've
But one
definitely
thing
not met.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting actually because one thing I do know is that you are an artist. So the
Hmm.
whole point of these little recordings or documents of conversations that I do is to talk with artists and creative people. And we did exchange a few back and forth sort of messages on Facebook last year. I was going to say yesterday because time is an illusion. But
Yes,
and it was a common friend of ours, Lucien Zell, that introduced us
right. Yes.
online,
Hmm.
right? Is
Hmm.
that the? And so you are in Prague right now,
Yes, I'm in Prague right now. Yeah.
and obviously I lived in Prague for 2 years, and that's where I met Lucien too. How did you? First of all, where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Australia. I came.
The
Yes.
obligatory follow-up question I was going to ask is how did you end up in Prague then?
Well, I came here about 12 years ago. It was meant to be like a 3-month holiday, like a summer thing. And that just turned into 6 months, and then that turned into, well, 12 years.
Really? So you
Yes.
never had any long-term plans to stay in Prague?
No, no. I just got, you've been in Prague, right? It just gets you. Something
This,
about this place.
that is why I'm asking you because when I first went there, I had no idea how long I would stay. And so the thing that has always fascinated me about Prague is what is it about that city that, somehow makes people stay one way or another? I mean, what do you think about it? What do you think is the energy or whatever of
Oh,
Prague?
well, I think they attribute the quote to Kafka, who said something like, this city has claws. And yeah, you try to escape and it just pulls you back in. There is
Yeah.
some mystique here. There's some alchemical thing. I don't know what it is. Or maybe it's just the cheap beer. Ha!
Is it still cheap though, or is the price rising?
No, it's still cheaper than water.
Right. That's all. That's actually a very interesting thing about the place too.
I know, because it doesn't make sense, because water, it's just water, yet beer tends to have something else in it. So, you
Yeah.
know, yeah.
Hey, so it's great that you're quoting Kafka at me because I'm a really big Kafka fan.
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
What do you
yeah,
think he meant by the clause? I mean, obviously, he meant a lot of things by it, and perhaps he also
sure.
meant some painful things because knowing about his life wasn't all laughs, and a good time. But for you,
Yeah.
what represented those claws?
Oh boy. Let's see. Uh, I think it might be something to do with when you get home to your native country, mine being Australia. You get home and you walk around and you're like, okay, where's all the Gothic stuff? Where's all the Baroque? Where's all the, um, you know, where's all the architecture? Where's these bridges? Where's these dark alleys and mysterious passages and it's just something here that I mean other cities have it as well, I'm sure. Um,
Yeah, I've never been to Australia actually, never. And I mean, growing up in Europe, it seemed like such a very far away place. Where exactly are you from in Australia?
oh God, I'm not even sure it exists anymore. It's probably been burned down to the ground.
Wow, that's no joke actually recently.
Yes,
You
yes,
know what I
yes.
mean? But where was it a small town? Was it a big city?
Yeah, so in the 1980s, I grew up as a child in Sydney, and towards the end of the 80s, we moved to a really small country town about 400 kilometers north of Sydney. The town's name is Wingham. And Wingham is, yeah, like population 2,000. It's cradled between the mountain range and the beaches. So it's like this. It's subtropical. It's where the subtropics begins as you're driving north in, on the eastern seaboard. So it's very pretty. It's green and lush, and we spent our entire teen years wandering through forests and riding motorcycles around and just having a wild time.
Sounds awesome, actually.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Would that have been the backdrop that inspired your artistic endeavors at an early age? I mean, well, let me ask you this: when was it that you discovered an interest for the arts? Do you remember? Were you a child? Did it start early?
Uh, my family likes to put it to me like this. I was a late talker. My mom was very concerned about it. She said, I took you to the speech doctor because you were almost three, and you still weren't talking, but you were already drawing. You were already drawing
Yeah,
before you
really.
could talk. Yeah. So it's the speech therapist said to her, just one morning, don't feed him breakfast, and he'll ask for it. So apparently my first words were, "Mom, can I have a drink?"
Hmm.
Hmm.
Right. So was it a way for you to communicate drawing?
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? If you're not cognitively there, in any kind of lyrical sense or speech. So, but you're actually communicating something with the visual realm. My grandma picked it up real early and just started buying me all these pens. And my mom would steal reams of paper from her work and bring it home. And so I was, I've always been drawing. I never stopped, even in those horrible teenage years when all that creativity gets squeezed and squashed out of us. Um,
Hmm.
by
That's
illiterate
true.
teachers. Yeah, so I had a couple of good high school teachers um, who they also uh, they saw something in what I was doing, and one of them actually approached our school principal and said, "Look, can we get these kids some decent paints? You know, because they're using all this rubbish paint." So
Yeah.
he managed to get a little grant together from the school to buy us some quality paints, and then it really started from there. That same teacher pulled me aside one day and said, "Look, have you seen these Fibonacci things? You know, the golden mean and the golden ratio." I had nothing. I had no idea what it was, and yeah, ever since then I've thought, wow, like when you're an artist, you get to have these conversations with your teachers, and it feels like you're in this strange club, you know, like you're having a conversation with the ancients or the masters, or the information is getting, pushed down from one teacher to the next and one student to the next. And so I really appreciated that, um, growing up like that, feeling like there's something higher to what we're doing.
Is there something higher to what we're doing, right? Are you a religious person?
I'm not actually, but I've had certain, let's say, psychedelic experiences that allow me to realize there is some noetic sense in the universe that,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, that we're not just these ego creatures, these things of meat and bone. There's there's something else going on. Um,
Right. Right.
once you,
What do you
yeah,
reckon that is? Have you come up with an answer, or are you still exploring?
oh, wait, sorry, I missed that.
Have you come up with an answer for what we are then, besides the meat and bones, or are you still exploring?
Oh boy. Yeah, well, some would say that in the universe there might be, like, just like there's laws of gravity and laws of physics, there might be this, like, consciousness is just something out there, and we just tap into it. We're like little receivers and transmitters, and we kind of we can sort of hone into it. I'm not sure if I'm one of those, but it's an interesting idea.
Do you think that drawing is part of that exploration that you're trying to do? Because I'm looking at the paintings and the drawings that you sent me,
Uh-huh.
and that I've looked at from just social media and online,
Hmm.
and they are fascinating works. I have to say,
Uh,
it's really beautiful stuff, but also a little bit. There's a sense of danger and mystery in them. There's a
hmm.
sense of movement, but at the same time, there's a stillness in them. I don't know if this makes sense, but there's a lot of contrasts in your works.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, like I'm also teaching students, some younger ones, some older ones, and I'm trying to get them often to, break out of whatever they're trying to do. Like if they're trying to paint the house or the tree or the thing, and I just say, look, let's just set a time here for, let's say, 20 seconds. You don't
Hmm.
have time to paint the entire tree in 20 seconds, but you can
Yeah.
kind of get a gesture of that. You can get sorry, um, you can get an impression of it, or
Hmm.
so when you move so quickly like that, you don't really have enough time to think. So, and it's especially great for drawing. It's a little bit harder with painting because, at least the way I paint with oil paints,
Hmm.
it's a little bit more calculated and careful. But that first drawing, if the initial concept can be developed sort of quickly and without too much thought, you might be tapping into what we spoke about earlier, perhaps. Perhaps.
Yeah. Hey, I always hear that, when it comes to making art, there's two kind of ways of approaching it that I've kind of narrowed down throughout sort of the years of talking with artists, I suppose, but also mainly of just experiencing art and making art one of the main reasons, one of the main goals in my life, or one of the main things in my life. And what I've narrowed it down to is that there are artists who believe that there's creation and there's discovery.
Uh-huh.
And those who believe that there is creation believe that they can create. Those who believe that they're discovering, they are sort of think that things are already out there and it's up to us to just find them.
Define
Um,
them. Uh-huh.
what do you think? I mean, where do you stand between those two things? I mean, the most interesting views are always the ones in between, But
Right,
what would you
right.
say?
I kind of go with the more scientific thing, like the discovery, I think, rather than just the creation. I mean, of course, I would sort of float in between the middle, but I think it's art is a little bit like the sciences where, they've got a hypothesis, but they don't know what they're going to get when they look at their data. And a lot of the times it'll drive them in directions they didn't realize it was going to go, the scientists, that is. And it can lead to incredible discoveries. And I think as a painter, it's a similar thing. Even if you're doing something like a flat out copy, like you've got a photograph and someone's asked you, hey, can you copy this and paint it? As you get into it, you'll sort of put the photograph aside and you'll try to bring something else into it or out of it. So there's a discovery that takes place usually a few hours into a piece. I find I have to get past a certain time period, say 2 or 3 hours, and then some discoveries start to come out. And you may look at it the next morning and think, wow, okay, where did that come
Mm.
from?
But like, do you have like a general concept in mind when you start working on a drawing, or
uh,
no, you just let it go, you just let it come out?
um, it's a bit of both, because I like the natural world. I'm just standing in the gallery now looking at the work and thinking, some of these paintings actually contradict everything I just said. you know,
Right. Yeah, that's
yeah.
cool, It contradictions is it that's it's very hard to come up with definite answers about anything at all, I think. And I think that particularly when you're, I don't know, when you have an interest in the arts, the more you find out about things and the
hmm
less you realize that you do know in the end. It is in a sense almost scientific, but
hmm
yeah, you mentioned the scientific approach, and I wonder, do you think that there's a reason why? I mean, you also mentioned the Fibonacci sequence earlier. Do you think that there's a reason why that approach is the one that seems to sort of be closer to the way in which you work?
Uh, uh, well, I think it's got something to do with logic. We are logical creatures, and we don't fare very well when we're being lied to or we suspect something is, like not logical, illogical. So we're trying to balance that a lot, I think. Um,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, someone said to me the other night when we were having a talk in a bar, and he said, "Oh man, I think you're just using too much logic with your analysis of this situation." And I just thought, how can what? Too much logic? Like that's all we've got, don't we? I mean,
That is what that's all very often what I think as well that differentiates us with other living creatures in the world is logic,
Hmm.
essentially. But maybe it's a very specific logic that's very specific to us human beings, so to speak.
Right, right, right.
But
Yeah, well,
another thing, and yeah.
I don't think using like illogical thought gets airplanes built, or the fact that we're having this conversation right now, this would not be taking place without thousands of years of um,
Yeah,
discoveries and using logical thought. So and
yeah,
so I said, this was my response also to the guy. I said, look, when you think logically about the world, when you do, you come across something that does stand out as mysterious, it's then even more mysterious because, uh, if you just go around, thinking that fairies exist and blah, 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 and someone tells you that, oh, yeah, well, this other thing is there, it's not quite as magical. It doesn't seem as mysterious because if you believe everything and, if your mind is too open, your brain falls out.
yeah. That's actually a very cool way to put it. It literally could happen, you know.
Yeah.
Um, in I'm very curious about the scientific approach and also in terms of color. I'm looking at your paintings now as you speak. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually pretty cool to be doing this as you're saying all of this stuff because I'm seeing that you do a lot of interesting things with colors in your paintings and drawings,
Yes.
and I
Uh-huh.
wonder whether that also can be explained in a scientific sense. Would you be able to
Uh,
do that?
yes, it can. I often use what the Impressionists that they stumbled upon, 120 years ago, because in science they had discovered the electromagnetic spectrum, and
Mm.
you know, from ultraviolet to infrared, everything between that's what we see. And it's not all balanced. We don't see the same amount of blue and as the same amount of yellow, for example, or red or orange. They're different amounts. So, for example, the yellow bit, the spectrum that we see of yellow, that vibration, we don't see much of it. Which means if you put a person in a room that's just completely yellow, they'll feel sick. Like they will not like it much. It does. It's just the color. Like you need to balance it out. And so the way you balance a color out is to put its opposite color there or its complementary color. So, this is what I teach with the students. I get them to mix complementary colors. I get them to put the complementary colors together. Um, so often I will start a painting if I know that in the end most of the painting is going to be green because it might be a landscape. I might start it with its complementary color, which is like a red or a deep burgundy red. So that'll be the first layer. And then when you put all those greens on top, the red comes through and they sort of vibrate against each other and it dazzles the eye.
Mm.
And they can, if the two colors mix, they will become a tertiary color, which is like the grays and the browns, which I also love. So yeah, it makes it encourages that in the end the painting is going to be harmonious together. It's if you put the right base color down, it's like a bass line in a song. Without the bass, you've got no ground for the guitar and the drums and the vocals to kind
Yeah.
of harmonize on top. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's a good
I
connection.
find that in music, with the bass offers a sense of comfort too, because it sort
Sure,
of
absolutely.
through its vibrations, through its bass tones, it allows you to have some sort of a guide through whatever adventurous pieces, let's say in a jazz piece, might be
Hmm.
going on. If it's free jazz, you've still got the bass as a reference point.
Yes, yes. The bass is a bass. The bass is a
Mm.
bass is a bass. It holds everything down, but it's also without it. I can't dance, man. I can't. I've heard music where there's no bass, like there's this modern stuff where it's just this hi-hat sound with a singer. It's
Right?
I'm like, where's the bass? What is going on with this? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. What kind of music do you listen to?
Um, okay. Geez. For example, if I'm painting, I like to listen to music that tends not to have too much lyrical content, like because lyrics can distract the mind a bit. You start to think about words and ideas and concepts that may not have anything to do with what you're working on. Whereas if you're listening to music that's in a different language, or of course jazz, probably my favorite to work with is upbeat jazz because it takes you on a different place. You start moving, your hands are moving in time with that insane sax solo and the way it's bouncing off the keyboard left hand because he's laying down these bass tones and it all and then you've got this the drummer is just pounding away and driving this thing and then so
Yeah.
uh, or I'll listen to African music where there's this constant rhythm which you can really sink into, just get into that rhythm. Yeah,
The grooves, the grooves.
the grooves, the
Hey, your
syncopations.
your paintings are very groovy.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting out of them. There's a groove to them. Yeah, there's a real groove to them. But balance, I think, from what you were saying earlier, remains a very important aspect of making art for you.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Because
It's
I think it's about not bringing any more shit into the world. Wait, sorry, I just swore. Am I allowed to swear?
Of course you are. You're
Okay.
definitely. It's encouraged, actually.
Oh, fuck.
No.
Great.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, but hey,
Uh,
just given that balance is such an important aspect in your in your art,
mhm.
would you say that balance is an important aspect in your life, or indeed that you have a balanced life?
No, my life is pretty chaotic and crazy.
Me
Uh,
too, man. Me too.
yeah, I'd rather keep it in the paintings. Yeah, like
So the balance becomes some sort of an ideal that you're sketching out too within your work. It's part of that
mhm.
research that you're doing with your work, or is it not?
The balance is something I'm trying to achieve in the work. Yes. For example, I don't want to sell a painting to someone where the first thing they feel they need to do is take it to a framing shop and get it framed. It's like you don't need it framed. If the composition is right and all the directions and line and texture is interesting enough, you should be able to keep people's interest in the painting for more than 3 seconds. You don't need a frame to just frame it all. The frame is telling the wandering mind, oh, look, everything inside this frame is the picture. I would rather the painting just sort of end and, connect outward with its surroundings. It don't need a frame. It's like putting a fence up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is really interesting. Well, then, what would be your definition for, let's say, museums? If you walk into a museum, what is the thing that you would admire about it? Perhaps it's the way it's structured or the selection of works. What what would your impression of a museum be, and what would be the things that would define it or shape it?
Okay. So with what I just said, I'd have to say, no more frames. Get rid of the frames. It's funny. I was just in Florence, in Italy, with my girlfriend, and it was late in the day, and we wanted to go into the big gallery there. What's
Yeah,
the
Galleria
Uffizi?
degli
If,
Uffizi.
if,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, the Galleria
yes,
degli Uffizi. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was going to close, so we thought, can we at least get into the exit shop, the gift shop, you know? 'Cause we thought we might go in and look at the books or something. Plus, it was freezing cold outside, and we were waiting for a bus back to Prague. So, like, let's go and hang out in the bookshop of the gallery, right? And they actually let us in. So we got in, and as we were going through the section, there was this door opened, and we go through the door, and then we realize, wow, we're actually in the gallery now. We'd inadvertently snuck into the gallery by mistake. So we got to see some of these masters at work.
Wow. That must have
Yeah,
been a thrill. Anything catch your eye?
there was a piece that stood out uh, because it was okay. I can't remember the name of the artist, but the piece had someone had clearly been murdered, poisoned probably. So he's falling off the table and he's crashed down, and it's the reactions on the other people's faces as they see what's just happened, because some of them are clearly happy that this guy is now gone, and some of them were not, and some of them are already kind of conspiring, like what to do next now that the guy is down, and all this, just in the facial expressions, you could really see something captured there. There's some crazy narrative. So yeah,
That's interesting.
that one caught my
Well,
eye.
I was also in Florence last year around this time, and I definitely can testify that it's very cold there at this time of the year. It's cool
Mm,
that you took the bus there from Prague. How long does the trip take?
no, it wasn't cool. The Ryanair, they canceled our flight back to
Ah,
Prague, so we had to take a bus. We needed to be back, so
wow.
uh,
Hey, but it is cool that you got to somewhat visit some of the Galleria
yes,
degli Uffizi at night. I'm of the impression that art galleries should be open at night because can
ah,
you imagine? I mean, sometimes they are. I mean, on special occasions, but I think
right,
that they should always be open 24/7.
sure thing. Hey,
Because
well,
when you just get the urge, you get the urge. I'm reading a lot about the futurists now, and I'm getting into futurism a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with that art movement.
the Italians in the early 20th
Yeah,
century, yeah,
they
yeah.
had an interesting take on museums. They didn't like them. They
They,
saw them as
yes, that's
old-fashioned and
right,
construct them an old-fashioned narrative. But the irony of it is, of course, that nowadays, where do we experience futurist artworks, and where are their
right.
memories kept alive? But in museums.
Hmm.
Really,
Yes.
it's interesting when you think about it. Hey,
Yeah.
so I know that can you believe it? We've actually passed the half-hour mark of our conversation, but I'd like
Oh
to
boy.
keep talking with you for a couple of more minutes, if that's okay.
Sure. Yes.
It's really cool to talk with you. You know, you've got a lot of fascinating theories and concepts and ideas about making art. But one of the reasons why I thought of getting in touch with you was because I was on Facebook and you popped up on my wall. I think they still call it wall. I hope they do, because it's a cool kind of concept. But and you had an exhibition going on right now. Actually, is it still happening
Yes,
in
it
Prague?
opened 2 days ago here in Prague. Yes.
How long will it be? Will it be staying open?
Till the end of February. So another 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah, till the end of the month, end of next month.
I think I might just be missing it because I'll be there in March. That's a shame.
Ah,
Where is it? Where is it being held?
the gallery is called Gallery 1.5, or Jedna a půl in Czech. It's over in Újezd on the other side of the bridge.
Hmm.
Um, yes, we can post
Gallery one and
details.
a half.
Yeah,
Gallery one
one and
and
a
a
half.
half.
One and a
Hey,
half.
so
It's pretty
can you tell me a little about this exhibition?
yeah, okay. So recently, just after I had a show last year which featured a lot of paintings from Prague and interiors of places in Prague that I just found to be astounding, like these old libraries, for example. And after that, I just wanted to try something different, something completely different. So I started putting objects and things and even photographs into a water tank, like an aquarium, a fish tank. And I turn all the lights off, put some candles in there, and maybe just one little spotlight thing, swish the water around, maybe put in a nice colored rose or something, and to start photographing those little scenes that I was making. And
Mm.
from that, I made a whole series of works based on what I was seeing in the water, with the reflections and the refractions, and the way you could just put anything in there. Like, doesn't matter. It becomes this little world, little water
Yeah.
world, And I just started painting those, and it was just something completely different. So I like that idea of bending perceptions of how we see, and like water does it. If you look at a reflection on the water, if you're at the river, um, and you see the reflection of a tree or house from the other side, you're looking at something that is inherently weird. It's very strange to see a reflection of anything, the way it is dealt with by the ripples on the water. So
Yeah.
I like those ways that we can deliberately change the way we perceive things.
Yeah. But there's also like just a fascination for water. It's interesting that you're saying that. I'm totally fascinated with water. And when I made a short film in Prague, 'cause while I was living there, I also had a similar concept where I would be looking at people
Hmm.
as if they were in an aquarium. You mentioned that word aquarium.
Yeah.
It's an interesting starting point for an artwork.
Yes. Yes. And also, what I didn't realize at the time was that because I had all the lights turned out and just a few candles and a little spotlight there, that kind of mood that it had created was very kind of Baroque like, still life. And it's really having to change my style and colors and everything, because now I'm painting something that looks like it's from, say, 250 years ago
Wow.
with the realists. And
Caravaggio.
yes,
Diagonal lighting, shadow play, all of that stuff.
yes, exactly. So I had to switch. I had to rethink my approach to just on a technical level. Um, so
That's cool. That's
yeah.
cool. Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I would love to ask you. First of all, I wanna document me saying this. I would really love to maybe shoot a video in your studio if you would let me when I will be in Prague in March. Would that be possible?
Sure. Yes. Yes.
It'd be fascinating for me. It would mean so much.
We can do that. I'll probably have most of the paintings back from the exhibition back in my
Yeah.
studio, so you'll get to see it
I
uh,
just thought of something
regardless.
actually. Yeah, I just thought of something. What about when people are looking at your works in an exhibition? How do you feel about that? I mean, how do you maybe even behave at an exhibition of your works with when people come up to you, ask you questions? What,
Hmm.
what is that relationship like between the painter and I don't know what the word would be, the spectator, I think would be the
This,
best
right.
word.
Just maybe like I said earlier about being a teacher, I like it when people spend enough time looking at a piece and they just something leaps out or something pulls them in, and they may ask a question because they want to know a little bit, like, why is that like that, or why is why are there no straight lines? Or, you know, so
Yeah.
I want to answer questions because it lets them think about the universe that they live in, that we all live in. And yeah, so I want them to uh, question something about their own perceptions, and not. I don't want to shock them. I'm not interested in doing something where they look at it and think, "Oh, I wouldn't want that in my house." I want them to think, "Oh, wow, I would love that in my house because I could get lost in it for hours. I could." One of my great painting teachers from the art school said, you can create enough line work and directions, you can keep someone's interest in the piece for a long time. That should be your goal with what you're doing. Like, keep the interest.
Hey,
Um,
so I mean, do you remember a moment or a particular painting where you had that reaction yourself? That just comes up. It might not be your favorite, but just something that you immediately think about that you had that experience with.
like in someone else's work or my own.
Yeah, someone else's work.
Oh boy. Okay. If you don't already know the Australian artist Brett Whiteley, I would
Hmm.
strongly advise looking up his work because this guy really knew how to twist reality and bend perspectives and have multiple perspective points. And he often used things like ink because ink is
Yeah.
very fluid and moving, and he would use that as some of the groundwork for the paint to go on later. At least that's what I think he did. Um, and he
Not
could,
only do I know him, but I also see his influence in your works.
yeah, yeah, it's there, it's there. He was just a master at drawing, especially with ink and charcoals, and then when he goes in with the paint, it's just magic. My goodness. Yeah, Brett Whiteley is his name.
I want to, just to, as a final question, there's so much that I want to ask you. Well, maybe
Hmm.
one thing, let's say two final questions, let's say. You
Okay.
brought up the fact that you also teach art. Um,
Yes. Uh-huh.
is that, I mean, do you get a lot of pleasure out of doing that?
Oh, yeah, because I love screaming at kids and
Right.
adults.
And
uh,
adults, yeah. I
uh,
like screaming at adults more than kids.
yes. I love it. It's really something. One of my teachers years ago, my music teacher, said to me, "Look, I think you might be you're a good student in that you probably be able to teach this. Make a couple of bucks on the side. You're student. If you can get a couple of your own students who come around weekly, you might be able to, survive a little bit more in this world and
Yeah.
just pass on what you learn. And because once you have a student who is returning, you got to stay ahead. You got to stay abreast of them, and you got to keep them interested and discover things together. And so I just sort of fell into it about, just around the time I was maybe in second or third year at the art academy. So yeah, I started to teach what I was learning from music and from what I was learning as a painter. So I love it. Yeah, I mean, a good teacher is a good student, is a good teacher, is a good
That's
student.
true.
Just
That's true. I agree with that. I feel like I'm a student more than a teacher. I love to learn things, and especially when it comes to the art world. And that's really what I love about connecting with artists who make works of art is because you learn something every time, and because everyone is making their own discoveries, and it's incredibly exciting. I find it.
yeah, I love that you said that. That's really, yeah, that's impressive because yeah. You discover these things, and you don't want to just bottle up the discovery. You want to just scream it to the world and say, "Look at this!
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you
Somehow,
know this?"
somehow. The hard part is just convincing yourself that what you've learned is of any interest to anybody, I find.
Oh, sure. Especially like there was this teenage student recently who, just gives you that face like, "Oh, I don't care." And I said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, okay. Hey, did you know?" I said, "Do you know, like, 'cause, we're learning about mixing colors." I said, if we just mixed all of these colors, all of them,
Yeah.
in the right ratio, do you know what color you would get?" And she said, "Oh, I don't know, black or
Yeah. Yeah.
brown, black." And I said, "No, it's very counterintuitive. The answer," I said, "No, you would get white. You get pure white. Just mix all the colors in the right ratio and you get a white." And
When I think of people who have that sort of a mindset, I'm always reminded of a friend of mine who was a guitar teacher. He taught how to play guitars, and these kids would come in, and he would start them off by learning how to play the blues, and
yes,
they had no interest in the blues because all they
hmm
wanted to do was learn how to play "Sweet
please.
Child of Mine" by Guns N' Roses.
Uh, of course.
You got a few of those too.
Hmm.
This is a fascinating talk, but but maybe we should, we should think about maybe closing it somehow because otherwise, I could talk with you forever, but we should get back to our lives, whatever that
Yeah,
means. But you sent me one piece that you said you had an interesting story about, the hop piece.
the hop piece. Okay,
What was
okay.
that's the story behind that? I'm looking at it now, and it's a beautiful work of art. It really draws you in. What's the
Okay.
story about that?
So the story with this one. Woo, this is a good one.
All right.
uh, so it was this time a year ago. I was listening on my way to work. I was listening to a podcast conversation with Joe Rogan, and he had a guest on Eric Weinstein, who's a like mathematician, public intellectual. And Eric was explaining to Joe, and he said, "Joe, you may want to have another hit on that joint with what I'm about to tell you, because this shape in mathematics could be the basis of everything. This is probably one of the most interesting discoveries in the last few decades, this shape that exists. It's called the Hopfield vibration, or HOPF, Hop." And of course, like Joe is sitting there like, "Wow, okay, can you show me an image of it?" And Eric says, "Well, it's a bit difficult because it doesn't really exist. Uh, We only have a few examples of it. One from these guys at this university, and they've come up with a way to explain the Hopf field." And as soon as I heard that, I thought, "Wow, wait, what did he just say? There's no example of it, like visually? That can't be right." So I looked it up, and yeah, there wasn't much that explained it. And so he's explaining that, it's basically a representation. If you've got a ball in 3 dimensions, so a ball is a 3-dimensional shape. But what would it look like if it was spun into a higher dimension, the fourth dimension? And so I started thinking, wow, okay, how do you paint a ball in 4D, especially onto a 2-dimensional canvas? So I attempted it. I did it. I had a picture here in the studio of this beautiful old railway station here in Prague that had really nice colors, and I thought, I'm going to paint that railway station as a ball in 4 dimensions and see what happens. And so I put a picture on Instagram, and let's say maybe 2 weeks later, I get an email from chief editor of Physics Today magazine. It's an American publication. He wrote and said, "Hey, are you the guy that painted the 4-dimensional ball, the railway station in Prague?" Yes, that's me. He said, well, we're running a story in February's edition of Physics Today, and we just wondered if we could use the image in our magazine to explain, mathematical topology. And of course, I said, yeah, please do. So they published the picture in the magazine. And then, so that happened. And then a couple of weeks ago, I actually wanted to write to the mathematician, Eric Weinstein, who inspired the whole thing in the first place. I found him on Instagram, and I thought, can I just write this guy? Like, can you write someone on Instagram? So I wrote him, and I said, hey, I painted this thing, and because I heard you talking about it with Joe, and he didn't get back to me until 2 days ago, the day of the exhibition. He wrote me a message and said, hey, thanks for I'm really happy I'm honored that you painted the four-dimensional ball thing that I was talking about. So, yeah, that's the story behind that painting.
That's mind-blowing. That's a mind-blowing concept. I'm looking at your painting, and I think it really, hearing you say that and looking at your painting really illustrates it so well. And guess what? I'm looking at the Instagram, and he, I think, liked the painting, which that's why you were saying that. I was like, hey, that's pretty cool to get recognition from the person that inspired this work. That's cool. Hey, so all right, so we're gonna have to wrap this up. It was so fascinating to talk with you because I hope to talk with you more in the near future. Actually, it's really thank you for taking the time to do this.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, we can have this exact same conversation again some other time.
Yeah, exactly the same. Ask the same questions and see if you can come up with the same answer.
Yeah. Just
time repeats itself to infinity, some may say.
There we go. Okay.
Well, thanks very much, Lukos. It's great, and I'm looking forward to seeing your studio with my own eyes. I hope that we can make that happen.
Oh yes, I'm sure. Yeah, just take a bus. Don't
yeah.
Take a bus to Prague.
Well, it'll be difficult because I'll be coming in from Ireland, so I don't know if they've invented buses that that can travel through the well, not the Atlantic Ocean, whatever sea is, whatever water there is. But hey, so thanks very much, Lukos.
Hey, it was an honor. Yes, thank you.